Welcome to a special chapter in Legitimate Matters. This is the third episode in a 3-episode series with my guest, Richard Rosario. He's an exoneree who spent 20 years in prison after the evidence was finally submitted to the district attorney, and eventually he was released. Richard, I'm glad that you're here with the show. We've had so much conversations about the many missteps and what I consider to be gross negligence in your particular case. You, at the time that you were sent to prison, you had 2 small children, yes, married. What was it like having this experience with small children and being away from your family?
I mean, it was heart-wrenching. You know, here you are trying to explain to your daughter, you know, when the visit ends and she's clinging to you and she's not understanding why her father's not coming home with her, or your son, and it's torturous in so many levels because you can't give them any explanation to why it's happening, but it's not just happening to you, it's happening to your daughter, you know, and then your wife, your spouse has to go through living in a parallel world where they want to be connected to you, and here we are on visits, and you can't have your child on your lap, you can't prolong hug your wife or kiss her. So, you know, it wasn't just me being, you know, treated inhumane or dehumanized, but my wife and my children were subjected to that, subjected to pat frisks and, you know, just a lot of disturbance within a normal family structure, and it was hard. You know, my daughter used to cry a lot in these visits, and, you know, she was affected in a way that it harmed her for years, even up to the day of my release. And to this day, my daughter has separation issues, and relating directly to just having this experience of having to have a father in prison for so many years.
So, and what was it like for you just knowing that? I can only imagine how you must have been tortured, yes, on the inside every time your family left, while you were still incarcerated, knowing that you were innocent this entire time. And Richard, my heart goes out to you because 20 years is a long time. Yes. It's a long time. And your children were infants at the time, and now they're young adults. Yes. So how does that even affect your relationship with them years later?
I mean, once again, my daughter lost a father 20 years prior, so for me to come home, she couldn't understand. Like, we couldn't reach each other because she's an adult, and there was a discord between us because my daughter expected her father to, you know, really be the same daddy that she remembers, and whatever happened to me in there, it changed me in a way that it's affected my family. Wow. So just from having to go from visits and having to be separated by glass and bars and these strictures for years, when we got home, it was hard for me to show affection to people. It was hard for me to cry, to trust people, and you know, my daughter felt affected, and she would go through these, you know, these confrontations with me because of what we were going through and what she perceived was me changing things now that I'm out. But she was a grown woman, and I had to tell her she had to you know, move on from what happened to me. She had to become an adult, and, you know, thank God she has her own apartment now. She's striving for better things, but she could never let go for years. And, you know, now my daughter's doing better, and we have a better relationship a year and a half later. me and my son have a better relationship. But, you know, they're adults now.
They're adults.
And life struck them and took their father away. The justice system did that without any conscience or remorse to
Right.
not what they were just doing to me. You know, whether it was the police officers that were involved in my wrongful conviction, all the way down to the district attorney and your 3 lines of defense for anyone, any citizen in society. These 3 lines of defense failed me and failed my family, and it made our relationship strained, and we're still working on our relationship years later.
And you mentioned the 3 lines of defense.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
The 3 lines of defense for a citizen, being whether he's being charged with a crime or accused of a crime, the first line of defense is the police, the people that come to the scene and are given this most honorable task of defending the public and the citizens of the city or county they live in or they work in. And these public servants and cops in this case come to a crime scene and collect the data and do the hard work of finding out the witnesses and speaking to them. So the first line of defense failed me in particular because, in essence, they had information that could have actually given them a lead to the real perpetrator and would have also exonerated and vindicated me, saving me years and my family years from this torture.
And the second?
The second, prosecutors. After the police get this information and they get all this data, it's passed on to a prosecutor. They're supposed to look and do all the fact checking. You know, hey, there's evidence this guy might be in Florida, and they didn't do that. They never did the most basic of investigations.
And your first attorney, as a matter of fact, your
Yes.
trial attorney,
Yes.
was under the impression there was one attorney that replaced the
Yes.
other, but was under the impression that the judge had withheld the funds to go down and make the
Yes.
investigation to
Yes.
the witnesses, right?
Well, yeah, and that's the third line of defense, so to speak. When the police fail you and the district attorney doesn't do their due diligence, then you have finally a lawyer that gets the case. He's the last person to learn from it, and he's working behind the 8 ball. So he was misinformed about the investigation funds that were supposed to be allocated for the investigation of Florida.
Okay, so 3 lines of defense. The police officers, second is what?
The district attorney, prosecutors.
And the third one?
Your defense attorney.
Okay, let's talk about your children. We're going to go to break, and when we come back from break, we're going to talk about your amazing children and who they are today, because I understand they're very, very talented.
Absolutely.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Legitimate Matters, special chapter. Welcome back to Legitimate Matters. I'm here with my guest, Richard Rosario. Richard, we're talking about you being a family man, an advocate, and so many other things, even an entrepreneur. Okay, your kids are amazing from what I understand. Please tell me about them.
Well, once again, through the struggles that you always find that silver lining, and my children are that for me. I want to acknowledge my wife, who has raised them to be great children, and I'm happy to say that I have a label, Beyond the Grave. My children are artists under their own label, and we're hoping to give people the music that they love to hear.
And the name of the label is Beyond the Grave.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And your daughter is a vocalist.
Yes,
Okay.
she's an artist,
All right.
Amanda Rose, and my son is a rap artist.
Wow.
A composer of music. He plays instruments, and he writes for my daughter, and they're a great combination of team. I can't wait to share with the world what my kids have.
Well, I understand that we have a clip.
Yes.
Well, why don't we take a look at that clip now?
Visits fly by. The anxiety builds up inside, hurt and angry, 'cause this is my life. Collect calls and letters, short visits together. I wish this would end every night. Collect calls and letters, short visits together. I wish this would end sidelines. Hold me and tell me it's gonna be alright. Alright.
Wow, that really was amazing. And even as amazing as that clip was, it's even amazing that two children who have been victims in under such heinous circumstances where their dad was taken away from them when they were small children, but they have been able to overcome in spite of the adversities that they've experienced in their life. But you know what? How many children, how many families are still suffering out there that where their parents have been wrongfully convicted, exonerates that are released and given absolutely no support. We need support. We need to address the circumstances that so many millions of people face. We need your help. We need you to reach out to me. We need funding. We need support. We need to be organized. I will take the stand as the host and executive producer of Legitimate Matters to create a platform to help other exonerees and to create an organization where we come together and we're unified, where we help other families out here that have gone through similar circumstances that Richard Rosario and his family have gone through. No family under these circumstances who are innocent should ever be treated and have to suffer and then to be left and cast aside as if their lives don't matter. These individuals, Richard Rosario and his family, they are legitimate, they do matter, and I'm going to do everything I can to make that known. Legitimate Matters. Stay with us, because when we come back, we're going to speak to Richard a bit more about ways that you can get involved. Welcome back to a very special episode, a special edition of Legitimate Matters. I'm William Paris, your host, and I'm speaking with my guest today, Richard Rosario, who was wrongfully convicted, eventually exonerated 20 years later. Richard, in our last episode, we were talking about the fact that in 1996, you were in Florida at the time. A heinous crime was committed. It was specifically a murder. You were in Florida. The crime was committed in the Bronx, and then in 1998, a jury convicted you of second-degree murder, and you were sentenced to 25 years to life. This happens all the time throughout the United States in low-income communities specifically. Can you share some of the statistics of other victims out there that go through this?
Well, what I want to say is this pandemic that is going on.
Pandemic.
Yes, that's going on across the country, which is wrongful convictions. It's hard to put an exact number because no one is willing to be forthcoming with information that will reveal the illegal tactics being used to wrongfully convict men and women across this nation. But what's alarming is that since the advent of DNA in 1989, there have been over 3,000 people exonerated in this country for crimes they didn't commit.
3,000?
Yes, 3,000 people.
Wow.
So of that population, most of them have been exonerated through, extensive investigations, DNA. And what people are not realizing is that there are much more individuals in prison that we know now for crimes they didn't commit than ever before. If we take the statistics from the National Exoneration Registry, it stated that from between 1989 to 2001, there was a total of 466 people exonerated in the United States.
Wow.
From 2001 to 2010, another 753 people were exonerated. And here we are, almost a decade later, and it's only been since 2011 to date, 766 people have been exonerated across the United States. Now, it's a staggering number, and we think it's a lot of people, victims,
right.
but we don't have the exact number of people that are actually in prison, and we have a population of almost 2.3 million prisoners across the United States.
So the numbers that you're sharing are actually modest.
They're modest, and we're only talking about the people that have been exonerated.
Right.
So this is after the fact of decades of being tortured in penitentiaries across the United States.
Tortured is the word you used. Tortured is the word you used.
It is torture.
And in your instance, in your particular instance, there was evidence that was presented by the EXI to the district attorney prior to Darcel Clark, who was the district attorney in the Bronx County today.
Yes.
But then many years later, after this information or the evidence was then submitted, you were eventually exonerated. So what changed?
There was a lot of factors, as I stated before, that contributed into Darcel making this decision. There was a lot of political backlash on how she obtained her job as the chief law enforcement officer in the Bronx. And it took a lot of things, specifically the pressure from the NBC investigators who wound up finding out that the statements I had given police, everybody was working on information I had given to the police. They actually did the investigation. Police never did.
The police never did.
And presented to Darcel Clark. They said, hey, this guy was in Florida. So she says, well, we're going to find out. She says investigators to Florida. And lo and behold, they say, well, hey, there's evidence that he was in Florida.
So what were the terms?
Yes.
Were there particular terms of agreement between the EXI and the DA's office?
It was unprecedented. NBC was due to air Conviction on Tuesday, and Darcel sent investigators to Florida. Well, the documentary was set to air March 23rd. Darcel Clark sent investigators to Florida March 18th.
Oh, I get it now. So what you're saying is that this whole investigation and the story that was being rolled out by NBC actually put pressure on the DA's office to move on your behalf. So you're telling me that many years later, almost 20 years later, they finally sent investigators down to Florida to question your witnesses
that would have
who you submitted at the time when you were arrested.
The police, the district attorney, everyone knew. What's so shameful about it, I in my opinion, and with all due respect to Darcel Clark, well, when she came into office, I wrote a letter and one of hope. I seen a young black woman coming into office. And having come from our community, I believe that this was a sign of hope for me after 20-something years of Robert Johnson, who is another African American man who's part of the system, who denied and opposed my motion for 20 years and said they would not even look at this case. It was telling that on the 23rd, the documentary was released, and on that day, I was released by Darcel Clark.
Well, you know what? I want to say, in all fairness, when we consider the system that we live in, I want to point out that when you have a person that holds a high position, even within the government, as a minority in a position like whether it's Darcel Clark or other minorities in influential positions, they too have to tread carefully because of the problem and the systemic issue of racism in this country. So they just can't get into that office and I'm just going to say run buck wild, okay? They have to tread carefully under all of these political under the political pressures. There's so much more. You're also a family man.
Yes, I am.
I don't want to end the show without talking about you being a family man. Stay with us. Let's find out who Richard Rosario is today. We'll be right back.
I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to.
Welcome back to Legitimate Matters. You have been watching the third episode of a 3-episode series which I'm calling Legitimate Matters, the Special Chapter. And this has been about Richard Rosario, who was wrongfully convicted in 1996, who was sentenced to 25 years to life by a jury in 1998, spent 20 years in prison, and was finally released in 2016. And this all took place with so many missteps, gross negligence on the part of the attorneys, and I can go on and on. But if you missed the first and the second episode, go to my YouTube channel. That's YouTube, and then just search Legitimate Matters and look for the Richard Rosario story. So I'm going to now speak to Richard. And Richard, you're so involved. I consider you to be, in my book, you're kind of a hero to me because of your strength, which has been absolutely amazing. You're inspiring to me and so many others. But you're busy. You're an advocate. So tell us about that.
Well, I've been working in advocacy since I came home because I was having trouble readjusting and reintegrating. So having been involved in a lot of interviews, speaking out on behalf of wrongfully convicted people and exonerees, I started seeing that there was a huge gap in the reintegration process for men like me, dealing with housing, dealing with the trappings that come with society. A lot of people believe that exonerees come out and we're millionaires are going to become millionaires, and what type of individuals that brings around are individuals that want to take advantage of you.
Are these the trappings you're talking about?
Yes.
So be specific. What are you talking about? When you say trappings, what do you mean?
For instance, I've had friends that have been exonerated. One friend in particular, just to mention his story without saying his name, he came home and was exonerated for rape. He was in prison since he was 16 for over 16 years of his life. He's never made a decision as an adult, and he has gone out on dates with women that have seen him on the news, see him advocating, and they've kind of suggested that they would do him a harm or possibly call the cops on him if he didn't pay them
really
for the day, and situations where they've been extorted, conned by investors, conned by people in society that see us as marks now that we've come home. Some of us have no education or tools of how to deal with financing. You know, guys were poor before they were in prison, and they come home, they still have a poor man's mentality. So, you know, a lot of these individuals don't know that a lot of the friends and people they're attracting are just there for that dollar or that hope of getting a piece of that pie.
And you have an organization that is well, you're being organized. You're organizing yourself to really help these individuals. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, I reach out to the exonerees. As you know, I have an exoneree with me today. He's a great friend and brother of mine, Anthony DePippo. And my main goal is first to get an understanding with the exonerees so they could know that I've been through what you've been through. Right. So we kind of are brothers keepers. We keep ourselves in check and kind of get through the rules of society, the rules of engagement, so to speak, how to deal with things such as you get cold food in a restaurant, and you know, coming from prison, we get our food the way they give it to us. You
don't question it.
So I try to tell them that you don't have to be rude about it, but you have a right as a paying customer. You're no longer a prisoner to say, hey, the food is cold. So these type of things that are important for a person to be rehumanized, to know that you have a right to get up and go to the bathroom. You have the right to not allow people to take advantage of you. These type of things are not being focused on. So that's what I focus on with exonerees, and I've been working on my own with that.
I heard that John Legend has something similar to that. Yes. I heard a brief or I saw a brief story on that. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, John Legend, I've spoken to Nas, and I actually mentioned about the mass incarceration movement, the Stop the Mass Incarceration movement that John Legend has going. And what I believe is that they're focusing on a goal that it's not really tenable. They want to bring down prison population by over 50% in the next 10 years. And the truth about it, that it would be irresponsible, and that it wouldn't be a solution to anything. I think it'll create a bigger problem. And the powers that be are not just going to release guilty men. They're not releasing innocent men from prison.
Right.
So it's a big system that's a corporate system, the prison industrial complex.
So are you suggesting then that we create some type of a platform where we can get interested people like a John Legend and others to even sit down with you?
Yes.
Okay, sit down with you. You've lived this. You're still living it. You have ideas.
Yes.
Because it's one thing to, what I'm hearing at least, it's one thing to say release the prisoners, and what you're saying is it sounds great.
Yes.
But what about those that are released, that are found innocent, but there's no systems in place? Number one, to become more conscious of those that are wrongfully convicted and help to get innocent people released, but then provide a system and a program to help them become acclimate back into society.
Well, what's important is that not just exonerees should have the benefit of reintegration. Men that have committed crimes in our communities should also have the tools of reintegration, or we risk them reoffending in our same communities. So I believe everyone should have the proper tools for reintegration.
I see.
The problem is we don't have no focus on a group of people, and exonerees in particular, and it's what I'm focusing on, have no resources or networks. So I'm open to help from the community, from professionals that are willing to help, any sponsors. Ideas are great, but without having the right people, the professionals with me working on this project, it's doomed to fail, because I don't have the resources, the money, or the capability to really reintegrate these men with housing, jobs, and such forth, psychiatry, and these things that are important in reintegration.
Let's start a dialogue. Let's start talking about this. Let's become organized. I think that everyone, if you offer just a little bit of support, it can really go a long way. I'm stepping up today and making my contribution by creating Legitimate Matters as a platform to support your efforts, Richard.
Thank you.
All right? I'm here. I'm available. I can't tell you how much, again, that you've inspired me. Your story is deep. It's unfortunate, but I feel that to a great degree, there's this calling on your life. You may not see it, but I do, okay? There's a reason and there's a purpose for your life, and you are changing the lives of millions. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching Legitimate Matters. Follow me once again on my Facebook page or on YouTube. We look forward to you tuning in and seeing the next episode of Legitimate Matters. Once again, I'm your host, William Paris. Thank you for watching.